Okay, cool. And for our next agenda item today, we have Emma Irwin, who will be talking about AI and what OSPO should be thinking about them. And I'll pass it on to you, Emma.
Thank you, Natalia. So some disclaimers about that. Actually, maybe I'll introduce myself first for those that I haven't met before. I see Remy, who I know it's always nice to see you. Who am I? So I've been working in open source for 20 years, for 10 of those in the capacity of a developer, and for the last 10 or so, sort of when you reach 20, you just keep saying 20, as kind of a technical program manager in the capacity of helping organizations be efficient and respectful and show up in the open source ecosystem. So I worked at Mozilla for a number of years on the open innovation team in what was essentially an unofficial OSPO at the time, just helping teams get good at open source, but also innovating on a lot of things, including safety in digital spaces. And then for 5 years on Microsoft's open source programs office. So I was laid off there actually last year, as many folks are. So I'm not, the disclaimer is more that I'm not currently in an OSPO, but I've kind of spent a lot of my time kind of figuring out and kind of in a way fortunate to have a bit of time to just start tinkering and I launched the um, a lot AI and open source alignment working group in CHAOSS, and that came from so I watched a podcast or listened to a podcast as many of us do, and they were talking about this topic of AI alignment, which is also known as AI safety. I actually have a definition on one of these slides, but um, and that was the really compelling thing that came out of that for me is that alignment is really about ensuring that what AI systems do is what humans want and need, essentially. And that's also what, when you hear open or when you hear the word safety or AI safety, essentially that means the same thing as well. Yeah, does it do what humans expect? Now, there's like another layer to that, which is which humans, right? And so, so a lot of what we do in the AI alignment group, right now, we just ran a survey actually. Maybe I'll pop it into the chat a little bit later. I know that we're closing it today or tomorrow, so I don't know whether it'll work, but we're trying to understand how AI is turning up in people's lives and workflows and businesses so that we can start to form an opinion or maybe define a set of principles that state these are the things that these are the principles of alignment for open source, and that represents like decades of labor, the community values, as well as the business values. So we want to make sure that there's kind of this, when we ask the question of which humans, there's always been this kind of unofficial agreement between communities and businesses that open source is both of us, but there might be need to be a bit more clarity around that. So that's what, and we did do a ton of sharing, articles, and we are building resources. So if you join the AI working group just to view the resources that people are always sharing, then you might find it worth it. And then if you get around to contributing or attending a call, that's just a bonus. But I like a lot of people sharing things. So okay, so that's my preamble. I am kind of working for myself right now, and I have like some contracts, but I'm not part of any OSPO right now. So there might be a gap in what I'm thinking and what OSPOs are actually doing, but maybe that's also superpower. I'm embracing the wildness of the world right now, the good parts, I guess. So I said some of this already, and this is a lot of the content in my slide is generated from blog posts I've written or other things. So I mentioned what alignment is. Alignment is designing systems so that their goals, behaviors, and decisions are consistent with human values and intentions. In the context of CHAOSS, which is where we are, open source alignment means consistent with what we have built, known, value, and expect. Our metrics specifically, but also with the knowledge that those metrics might need to change to adapt to that. So, and then I also like to call out there's these two contracts between communities and open source and businesses and open source. OSPOs, like you're probably used to context switching. You know, when you talk to executives, you talk about innovation and reduced like being able to to leverage the community's efforts and the hiring pipeline. These are all things that we've been saying to businesses. And then when we talk to communities and folks who, are building those, then we talk about um, you know, making sure that we're good citizens in the community and all these sorts of things. We've always had those kind of two contracts essentially. But my worry is a little bit, it's getting a little bit too further apart the more we remove humans from that. And so I won't go too much into that, but that's sometimes you'll hear me refer to the two contexts or two languages. And yeah, I won't read the rest of the slide, but I think OSPO's role, if I was to be so bold, is to ensure that alignment with humans remains a priority as AI changes how open source is built, released, and sustained. So, if I was in an OSPO right now, I would be trying to keep that central still because I know that it's all about going fast right now and making the money and everything, and it's that's a very easy thing to lose in this moment. So I also thought, like, I have these three sections: use, release, and contribute, which usually map to our OSPO priorities. And I have like just a couple slides that synthesize some of the things we've been talking about in the AI alignment group. But then I thought I'd pause in each of these sections to just kind of hear from each of you what you think the problems and work to be done, etc., is under each of those, if that sounds okay. Then I don't have to just listen to myself talk. So, yeah, context, AI is now in the middle of how we use open source. So under the using open source, here's some just various data from some of the sources that we've been sharing around in our group, which you might have also seen out there. From a risk perspective and what can go wrong. We're most OSPOs have tools for things like typo squatting. I don't know actually where the term slop squatting comes, but there's just kind of a leveling up of how there's both the hallucination of names now coming into play and also, the, oh, yeah, I'll share these after, sure, with a disclaimer that, you know, um, I put these together pretty fast. Uh, it's really hard to understand licensing in LLMs, so I actually spent a bunch of time the last couple of weeks, even with a full open source model. So that's open mo model, open data, open everything. And I found it almost impossible still without like a lot of effort and maybe some tokens to figure out what the license is of data that something was trained on. So it's really hard. Um, there's, we don't really know how some code is being put together, what the context agents are being given, and so on. So I won't read all of that. There's 4% of Claude commits are now authored by Claude alone. So there's all this stuff that's happening really, really fast. And so I think that's really one of the reasons I was glad to come today is because I think we need to talk more. Um, Potential, and this is where I'll like ask you, I'm sorry there's so many words on this, but I have to put it together quickly. Potential open source focuses, OSPO focuses. So, I mean, I personally always feel like an OSPO's role is very much about education of engineers and, but maybe it's also becoming education via two agents and AI, like this context setting for the AI we're using. I don't know. But so there's a lot of different things that like there's these three sections: govern dependency, shape how agents operate, and protect the dependency ecosystem. There's a lot of different work that we could be doing. I'll just call out a couple here. So um, visible dependencies disappear. So monitor the health of yeah, so I'll just kind of over on this protect the dependency ecosystem square, like fourth down there, this monitor, because this is relevant to chaos, monitor the health of critical dependencies. I mean, in the past we have a chaos, the bus factor, which became, I think, the contributors factor, and there's also response time and all these sorts of things that we have in the past thought about the health of open source communities, which might themselves be changing. So burnout signals, there we actually might see an increase in merges. We actually might see more activity, which makes it seem like there's more contributors when it's really AI. And so I think there's some adjustment that we need to do when we're not just that we're monitoring the health of our dependencies, but looking for some like trying to get through the noise of trying to find the human in the middle and see like are they there? Are they actually healthy or burnt out? So I think there's definitely some innovation for OSPOs to do around monitoring the health of their dependencies. So that's one. I'll choose one from each square so that I don't. So going backwards, the shape how agents operate. So, this is a really interesting one for me because I mean, I don't know how much work you've all done building agents. I've done like very little, but I have been working a lot with coding with like Copilot and Claude and worked a little bit with agents. And I've realized that, for example, open washing is in the training data. So if I tell an agent to, build an open source solution, it'll immediately go for Llama or like some other like well-known models, which actually are mixed license and, the training data is not open and that kind of thing. So I think that the context setting for the agents and the AI we're working with coming from OSPOs will be really important so that engineers, for example, have that context provided to them that they should be working with initially to kind of cut through any biases or hallucinations or whatever that might be happening with their coding agents. Um, I also yeah, I'll leave that for a second. And then governance. There's a few things here. I mean, these are all I see these more as experiments and like this is the thing you should do. I think OSPO should experiment with context standards for agents. They should experiment with different health models of dependencies, license compliance. Yeah, I guess tracking tools published and approved. Yeah, so there's a few different governance things. I'm one of the things I'm doing right now is working with the Internet Society on upgrading their code of conduct, and we're adding an AI clause around consent. So that there's that anytime one of our maintainers, uses AIs with the consent of the community, anytime we contribute upstream, there's a clarity and consent that that project wants that. So I think that that's also a governance thing. So those are just some ideas. I have some more questions we don't have answers to yet, and I think that's most of what we're doing right now. So the first one is actually based on a project that I know is happening with ecosystems right now, which is should agents manage abandoned dependencies? And Andrew, I'm not sure if you know them, is like incredibly brilliant, and I've seen, this like, the idea that we could solve some of our sustainability and risk issues by, assigning agents to the job of maintaining some abandoned or a project. So, but is that something we want to happen? What does that look like? Who decides? Are we working with organizations, or is it just like if I was at Microsoft, is this just Microsoft, with their agents in a version, or is this all like companies coming together to do it? I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of people are talking about this kind of thing, but of course, if we think about alignment again, which I think is the center of this, is that alignment with what communities, who is the community involved in that? I think there's just a lot of like removing humans entirely is a risk. I can see from a business perspective why that would be desirable. Who is responsible when agent selects a dependency that turns out to be malicious? I mean, just generally the ownership of AI everything. Is that the engineer? Like how does OSPO build policy around that to protect them as well? Because, I'm sure that they're not, no one wants to get in trouble for something that do they blame AI and what's the accountability there? Um, Y- Yeah, if there's a context library, what should it contain? I mean, there's actually like a ton of work for OSPOs now. When I was laid off, it felt like OSPOs were being absorbed into organizations because it was primarily an engineering capacity, but I feel like there's just so much work cut out for us at this point. Um, at what point does AI tooling require disclosure to your user? This is again about consent. I think consent is really central, but those are some questions that I had, so maybe I'll just pause there. And, just among us, how is AI turning up in like, what questions are you seeing or work that you're thinking about in the use, like taking a dependency? Well, I can't hear you, Natalia.
No, I'm just thinking, but
Yeah.
I guess like one of the things I've been thinking about, a lot of my work is centered around like repository hygiene and repository standardization.
Mm.
So, and then recently some of our repos shipped like a agents.md to be able to facilitate work with agents doing development on their repo. So I'm just
Mhm.
thinking of things like that, like how can we set up the repo with enough documentation um, in that we can help guide agents to doing development the way that aligns with how we'd like them to do it. Yeah, so kind of thinking about like setting the infrastructure and the foundation to be able to support agents doing work on repositories. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Anyone else thinking about anything specific in use as it relates to AI?
I don't know, but in terms of so what we try to do in our case is to kind of stay off all of the security and responsibility part and just build recommendations and best practices. So also approved licenses, yes, okay, we have kind of a list of licenses that we recommend, but then for everything else, we just refer to the to security. But yeah, but those are interesting questions that are. I think the interesting one for us is around the dependencies and
Hmm.
yeah, because already just to understand what your dependencies are, it is a good question and. Mm.
Yeah, and I think there's probably somewhere in executive suites asking, can we just for all these inactive, can we just fork them and maintain them or rewrite them? I'm sure there's all kinds of questions like that, and the OSPO is going to be pulled into those conversations, I suspect.
Yeah, because if you rewrite them, then probably someone else wants to rely on them. I don't know, and then you start
Yeah,
to be a provider of the famous um, XKCD
right.
leg of the whole thing. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to cut anyone off though if anyone had any last things to say about use, but yeah, no one's figured it out. That's the one comforting thing in this moment, although it's also comforting when things are figured out, but it means there's work to be done, which is helpful in this economy. So release, so releasing open source, this is when I at Microsoft we had policy and sort of automation around releasing. I mean, I'm sure they still do, but like some of the things that we did before AI was a factor was, you couldn't, your repo couldn't turn to public till you had sort of the business sign off and the legal sign off and those sorts of things. I think that kind of process will still be important, but there's kind of a lot more that's coming into play right now. And also the training of maintainers that you just can't throw an open project over the wall. That's probably more true than ever. But one of the interesting things that I keep getting stuck on too is like the open source AI. And I feel like this is an area that's because there's such a race right now, there's just a lot of noise around what that means. So for me, just making sure that engineers understand what that means. So there's the OSI definition, which has the training data doesn't have to be, I'm trying to avoid the word hidden, but you don't have to open the training data. It can be described. There's the meta lemma style. There's vendor marketing. I mean, there's just a lot of things. And when I have gone into my chat agent and said, what open source AI solutions do you have? I have to really keep reprompting it and reprompting it and reprompting it till I get to something that I want. So I feel like there's still a TBD around what open source AI is right now. Like that we actually understand what the license are, that we can reproduce the training, that there's community governance, and no one has achieved this, and I don't even think anyone's working on it, to be honest. But and maybe that this is me being like an open source kind of, I think they call us purists when they're trying to insult, but I feel like this is work to be done as well. Like organizations are going to be have an opportunity to lead how we talk about open source AI. Oh my gosh, it's such a bright screen. Potential open source AIs to do. So yeah, I just mentioned kind of the same rules like of releasing, but maybe a little harder to follow with AI writing things. I'm not sure how OSPOs are thinking about releasing code that includes code that is written by AI, which may or may not have the right license. I know everyone's kind of covering their eyes a bit right now. I don't mean OSPOs, but the world. I mentioned the code of conduct needing AI clauses in, just from if your engineer is releasing an open source project, I'd want to make sure that my code of conduct has these type of clauses. And I'll give you an example. Over at the Internet Society, I was in a community call and there's like a ton of AI note takers suddenly just came into play. I'm like, whoa, it's like flies in the room, right? And so just making sure there's the consent pieces and interaction with your community, making sure that engineers understand how nervous, essentially, some folks might be to these types of things. And that can really help build a reputation for your organization in showing respect for individuals, the humans that come in, the alignment piece, training data transparency. I mean, OSPOs have always pushed organizations to be more open. I think that includes things like data transparency and getting just better at helping people feel confident in what they're using. Agents acting in your name, self-explanatory, who's accountable. If you have agents merging pull requests and, if people feel frustrated by that, who's accountable for those frustrations? Um, it's very easy. I've had coding agents want to put my secret into like a file in that's not in Git ignore, and there's all kinds of risks there. I'm sure AI is getting really a lot better at this, but it doesn't mean engineers are prompting correctly. So there's a lot of risk. I heard you say that your OSPO isn't working so much on security, which kind of makes sense that that's a team that works with OSPO rather than OSPO's job. But it depends on how big the organization is, I guess. And then again, yeah, just community plan, not just code. I think that continues to be a risk for organizations to make sure that their engineering teams, and I guess as AI becomes makes coding more accessible, there's a whole new generation of people to teach what it means to release an open source project because it's in a way, it's made releasing things more accessible to other generations of people. So there's maybe even more education to do there. So yeah, some questions. And again, I threw these together, so I hope they're relatively good. Similar questions about agents committing code on your behalf. Yeah, your license, is it relevant when um, if it's just an agent and not a maintainer, is that okay for your organization? Do you want to ask for a specific commitment from your engineers to turn up to respond to any types of questions? I mean, what does it mean to interact with the activity when you're starting to lean heavily and your executives are leaning heavily on you to do it? So that's like quite challenging. And then should codes of conduct, again, I keep bringing this up, I think, because that's work that I'm doing right now. But I think that human piece is really, really important and probably the thing we're most at risk in losing. And in our AI alignment call yesterday, we have Coraline Emke from the Contributors Covenant and Ethical Licensing, and she's really interested in this, not losing the people part. And so that's why I emphasize there as well. Anyways, I'll stop there. So releasing. So your company putting code out there. What questions do you have, or what are you running into? Any inspiration and cool things that you know about?
Well, but I understand that for question number two, the scholars and in general practitioners are converging towards the fact that AI generated stuff is non-copyrightable, right?
Hmm.
And so it's kind of, yeah, and so I don't know. And and then the license,
Yeah, there was an article someone had posted in our AI working group about licenses. Let's see if I can quickly find it. Yeah, it was called Fair. I don't know anything about Fair Source or like how it's being described, but this was something that came into our chat the other day. Maybe it's helpful. And
And
uh, something that I haven't really called out here is the cognitive load. There's an article on let me just find that too. Hold on a second. Hmm. I'll try and find it when you're not having to watch me scroll through it, but
yeah.
there's already the discovery of cognitive overload for open source maintainers. And there's the pressure from executives to, go faster, use AI, these types of things. What is the OSPO's role in helping engineers set boundaries for their cognitive load? I feel like that's a thing as well in the future. Yeah, of copyright is, yep, I saw that. Copyleft is dead.
Yeah, one thing that our OSPO has been thinking about, I had a conversation with Remy about this, for assisting maintainers with, I guess, like the burden of having to go through so many PRs now that lots of people are using AI to make contributions to repositories. Oh, the formatting of this is not the greatest, but we were thinking of kind of setting up
Mm,
contributing guidelines that guide the way that repositories accept PRs. So, for instance, we don't accept PRs that don't directly address an existing issue,
mm,
touch more than a certain amount of files, contain more than a certain amount of commits, contain change core system files, are untested, don't pass the test suite. And these are guidelines that repositories can set themselves, and they can also just include that, oh, we are just not accepting um, repositories that are entirely AI generated. But just having these like rules and the um or adding certain limitations to how PRs are structured to ensure certain things. So, for instance, if we limit the amount of like files and commits, it would reduce the amount of review time needed from a maintainer or from a human and kind of reduces like the radius, right? Testing suite just ensures there's no breaking changes. Ensuring that PRs address existing issues means that it reduces the risk of, I think the word was roadmap drift, because it ensures that contributions made are aligned with like um, the roadmap and the priorities of the project. So just having these certain guidelines can help the way that we review PRs and accept issues as well. But that's one thing our OSPO has been thinking about. We haven't put this into practice quite yet, and
mhm,
haven't or aren't unable to talk about like actual tangible results. But this is one of the ways we were thinking of guiding AI development in repositories. Yeah,
And did you actually do it like proactively before like the problem arose? And
you can totally do that too. Yeah.
okay.
I love that. Roadmap drift. Is that what you said?
Yes, that
I
was the
love that.
term, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like, and in technology, we know that neurodiverse people are overrepresented. So actually, a lot of us are actually quite good at jumping between a lot of things. But that can actually be doubly bad as we're sort of like following the interest of what people are contributing. I love the idea of staying on track there.
Mm.
So just to go to contributing here, because it's sort of our the uh the runway home here. This is just what we were just saying, right? Like there's just a lot of the maintainer crisis is getting worse. And I actually have like a little graph here to show how folks are. We have a README in the AI alignment working group repo, which I'll try and share after this, where we're trying to track LLM projects, but it's a whole layer on top of the already critical open source sustainability issue. And so yeah, it's causing obviously a lot more problems, and there's lots of way that organizations are trying. Yeah, that isn't yeah, ours is actually listed on that list. So that would be so I think there's this like how open source projects are responding, but also recognizing the sustainability risk. Something I did when I was laid off is like worked more in the sustainability space, and I feel like, I mean, and I know from talking to Android ecosystems that there's fewer.
I think I lost the audio.
Yes, I don't think we can hear you, Emma.
Let me
Oh, now we do.
okay. Yeah, this is the problem. I apologize. I think it might have something to do with Firefox because as soon as I opened Firefox, this started happening. I don't, um, I was just what I was trying to say was working in the open source sustainability. So this is becoming more prevalent. The exhaustion is becoming more prevalent. There's fewer and fewer companies contributing to open source financially, and that's backed up by some of the data and ecosystems. They can track the GitHub sponsors number, like whether a project is sponsored or not. And I don't think Andrew's shared those numbers publicly yet, but they're, available in their data sets that it's decreased. It's just going down. There's fewer maintainers being sponsored, at least through GitHub sponsors. And I think actually Open Collective is also reporting less funding. The rallying cry to do more about this, the rallying cry to do more funding is louder than ever, but the actual actions do not seem to be translating out of that. And so I would suggest that it's also an OSPO's responsibility to help their executives see that as a opportunity to show up in the ecosystem in some way. FOSS Fund was a program I ran at Microsoft, and there's still, I think, FOSS funds being run, but I think there's a 2.0 of that where you apply metrics for chaos, you look for maintainers who are struggling under this kind of thing, help them set up governance, not just give money, but give time and help them set up. I think that there's an opportunity there anyways, off my platform there. Potential to-dos, yeah, upstream contribution policy, protect your dependencies, attribution, I think is something emerging out of code AI type of efforts. It was interesting, Coraline, who's in our group, used to work at GitHub like many, many years ago and created an action that allows you to ban contributions from users that you have banned from the organization. And so people are banning Claude and so she's like, this tool I made 10 years ago is suddenly like new again. So there's all types of things that people are thinking about, the authorship, I guess, of participate in ecosystem norms it's a massive opportunity, honestly, to help companies show up right now, for communities and for people, for maintainers, for CHAOSS to build new metrics that kind of build on the work that we've done. It's not like a lot of the metrics have gone away, but there's a new layer to them. And I think that, helping people evaluate their ecosystems better. Um, these are just some more questions. They're kind of similar.
I think we lost Emma again. No?
Yes.
Then.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what's going on. I'm almost done here, so hopefully I'll just have to put up with it. There's something I need to figure out that's going on with my system. A reboot helped, but then when I opened Firefox, it started again. So I think that might be my culprit, which is weird for internet, but and then if there was an action framework, I was just playing with this idea. Can you hear me now? Yeah, I mean, I think it's always OSPO for me is education, teaching, capacity building, capability, competence building, and just especially I think as more non-engineers start to work with open things, it's becoming the OSPO's role is actually becoming more important. Or I think they're sometimes called OSAI project offices or whatever so these are some more framework ideas. I won't read them all because we're almost out of time and my connection is bad. I also have this slide, which I'll share my slides later in case they're helpful. I have a bunch of the sources down below too. So, So yeah, these are just some of the things that we've been talking about in their AI alignment group too. So they're not just all Emma. Um, I guess the last thing I would say is there are experiments. Yeah, I mentioned this already. I mentioned this already around agents that maintain open source. What does it mean for businesses and business partnerships? I think that partnership piece for OSPOs is important to figure out how you're going to work with other companies on this. And yeah, so what you should do for sure is join our AI alignment working group. Chat, like just come and hang out with us. You don't have to join calls or anything, but there's lots of great links being shared. We'd love you to share what you're learning. I think it's all about learning right now and all the rest of the things on this slide. And that's what I brought today. I'm sure there's a lot more things we could say, but that's kind of a few things that maybe are helpful, and I'd love to hear continue the conversation.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Emma, for giving your presentation on AI and OSPOs. There's been a lot to think about in this space, so it's really nice to see everything come together and just have everything at least a lot more organized in my head. Um, yeah, so I saw that the AI alignment working group has a survey out. I feel like some attendees in this call can totally fill out the survey. If you can drop it in the chat. I think I have it in the agenda too, actually. Let me bring it up here. Okay, so here's the survey by the working group. Feel free to fill it out. Let's see. And we have 2 minutes left in our meeting. Any other final thoughts that anyone would like to share? Okay, awesome. Okay. And in terms of the future, next week we have a presentation by Travis Hathaway, who will be talking about how he uses chaos at Anaconda. So feel free to join us for that 2 weeks from now. And we will have some other exciting presentations coming up in the future. Yes. Mhm. Otherwise, I think that's all for today. So I hope that everyone has a great week. Thank you, Emma, again. Thank you, everyone, for
Thanks for
attending.
hosting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia.
Yes, thanks, Alan.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. And then stop recording.